Why do you think Michael Saylor is talking about $100 trillion valuation for Bitcoin? It's because it can scale up like no other commodity that's limited to time and space.
Yep.
This is our Constantine moment. For about 3 centuries, Christians were radically persecuted. And what was the result? What happened? They grew astronomically. They, for lack of a better term, weathered the storm. And when you can weather the storm, that means that you have something that is the basis for social and civilizational flourishing. When Constantine saw that, he said, that's what I want my empire to be. I want my empire to flourish and grow. That is what Bitcoin has been able to do over the last 8 years. We weathered that storm and we grew.
It's not that banks want to make the wire system so bad. It's that essentially banks have become this third armed enforcement on behalf of the state.
They become masters at promising that you are most free when they are most in control.
Bitcoin is a new technology, but we're going back in a way.
Right. The big lie that we were sold for so long was the notion that
Welcome to another episode of Simply Bitcoin IRL. Today, I have the honor of having Dr. Steve Turley joining me on Simply Bitcoin. Dr. Turley and I actually met each other at the Bitcoin conference in Las Vegas, and I've been watching Dr. Turley for many, many, many years now, so it's pretty surreal seeing him in person. And my first question to you, Dr. Turley, is what brought you to a Bitcoin conference in the first place? Because for anyone who doesn't know, for our audience, which is mostly Bitcoiners, right? Dr. Turley is extremely popular and well followed. A YouTuber. He has a channel, Dr. Steve Turley. You can follow it. I love his content. It's fantastic content. I've been watching him for years, like I said. And it was, again, pretty surreal, watching you, Dr. Turley, come into my hemisphere, so to speak. What attracted you to go to a Bitcoin conference?
it's a great question. It's wonderful to be with you, Nico. I love hanging out with Bitcoiners, crypto enthusiasts in general, but particularly Bitcoiners, because I think you're one of the few demographics, as it were, that actually recognizes what's happening in the world. So the vast majority of Bitcoiners I talk to recognize we're entering into, and you and I talked about this in Vegas, we're entering into really a new, for lack of a better term, a new age, a new civilizational moment in our human history. And we're right at the cusp of it. It's one of the reasons why things are so crazy right now. Theorists refer to it as post-normal times, when one epoch, as it were, comes to an end and a new epoch begins to rise. What was normal over the last, say, 100 years isn't normal anymore. It's not setting the rules. The old standards sort of dissipate, as it were, but yet new standards have yet to really establish themselves. So we're in this post-normal period. We're in this interim period that just doesn't make a lot of sense. And that's why things seem so chaotic and contradictory and complex and crazy and the like. But you guys get this. You see, we are in a transitory period, moving into a new era, a digital era, a cyberspace era that's opening up possibilities, the likes of which we've never even imagined. I mean, talk about the ability, just the ability to scale. I think you and I were talking about this actually in Vegas. Just the ability to scale in this new era is stunning. I often share the example. I don't have my cell phone on me now, but I often share the example. I used to work at Peabody Conservatory Library in Baltimore, which is beautiful. I recommend anyone to go and see. If you could survive Baltimore without getting shot, you will love this library, I promise. But it's called the Cathedral Books. When I was a student there, That was my part-time job, and it has 300,000 books. It's absolutely beautiful, but the building is massive, and it's gorgeous, and it's glorious. I'm glad we have it. But do you know how many books we have access to on our phones right now? Right? Over 100 million.
Yep.
And it's soon gonna be 1 billion. Cyberspace doesn't care because you can infinitely, as it were, scale up. Well, that's why do you think Michael Saylor is talking about $100 trillion valuation for Bitcoin? It's because it can scale up like no other commodity that's limited to time and space can. And so you understand we're on the cutting edge of a new era of literally a new epoch of human development. And 99% of people don't quite get that yet. They'll get there. They'll get there, but you're on the cutting edge of it. And so what I've been doing over the last 8 years of my channel is analyzing how politics particularly is changing in relation to this new epoch. And ironically, it's getting more traditionalist. So again, I think you and I talked about that. We are entering into sort of an archeo-future world where our ridiculously advanced technology is actually now engaged in a rapprochement with traditions. And so tradition and technology, literally religion and science are coming together in new ways that just haven't been the case, say, over the last 100 years in modernity and the second industrial revolution and globalism and the like. So I love talking to Bitcoiners because they understand that we're on the cusp of a new era. And what I love to do is just kind of bring in some of my own frames of reference to confirm for them that they're right. You're absolutely onto it. The future is yours, no question. And so I just get so excited talking with you because you guys inspire me the way your sort of techno optimism that helps fuel my paradigm of understanding the shift between an old industrialized dying order and this new rising cyber order that's happening. You get me very, very excited with that as well. So I assure you, uh, the um, the inspiration is mutual.
And Dr. Turley, it to me the phenomenon has been fascinating because, again, I feel like Bitcoiners were out of the Overton window, so to speak. We were kind of like outside of everything that was happening, kind of like in the mainstream political conversation. And it was really until the previous administration where our industry was attacked, from 20 different directions, that essentially it galvanized us. It forced us to throw
Yes.
our hat in the ring.
Yep.
And if you're not in the room, you're not in the deal. And now all of a sudden, Bitcoiners are in the room in DC, right? And when we now have influence, you have the Trump administration, um, basically saying, "Listen, we want to make the United States the Bitcoin capital of the world." We didn't really care about, or better said, I cared, but most Bitcoiners, most of my followers, most of my subscribers, they didn't care about politics. In
Right.
fact, when we started talking about it, when I said, guys, I don't think you understand. We need to vote for Trump or RFK Jr. because if we don't, things are going to get really bad. And we were getting pushback from our audience. Now, we can say, listen, we got Ross Free, the Strategic
Yep.
Bitcoin Reserve, Operation Choke Point 2.0,
David
you
Sachs. Yep.
David Sachs. So, like, it's like, yeah, it was important. But one of the things that I appreciate about you, Dr. Turley, is you were making content through some very dark times, and in American political history. And this was, between the era of 2016 to 2024. Like, I've never witnessed that in my life, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that you mentioned when you were talking earlier is you were talking about the concept of hope. And this is
Yeah.
something that Bitcoiners understand fundamentally. Michael Saylor has the website hope.com,
Yeah.
right? Very famously. But I think, and this is where, perhaps conservatives have not woken up to this reality yet. Fiat money essentially has stolen the time, energy, and work of every single American that has been saving and earning in fiat, which is the majority of the population, the lower and the middle class that don't have the means to save in assets. And that's the reason they can't get ahead.
That's
And this
exactly
is
right.
something that Bitcoiners inherently understand. And going back to one of the points that you were saying earlier, Dr. Turley, I completely agree. What we're witnessing right now is the great disintermediation. The
Yes.
internet has empowered people like yourself, has empowered people like us to essentially go around the gatekeepers of information and talk to the audience directly. And I think that's why you saw the rise of your channel. It became so popular because people were looking at the TV and they're like, what's happening on TV is not what I'm experiencing. And, and I remember tuning into your channels, like, he's on the dot. He's actually describing exactly what's happening right now. I'm getting my information from social media now. I'm no longer getting my information from the legacy media, which you and I
Talking
both know.
points.
Exactly.
Approved talking points from the legacy. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Correct. And then what I think is going to happen next is the disintermediation of money, right?
Yes.
Which is
Absolutely right.
extremely exciting. Um, but anyways, I want to get your take on that because these last 10 years, 9 years have been turbulent to say the least.
Yes.
But I think you and I both agree that what's on the other side is freedom and prosperity, the likes of which human civilization has never experienced before.
That's right. Oh, well, so well said, Nico. Again, because you're tapping into this unprecedented scaling capacities that we have. Again, Saylor is talking about literally everybody can be wealthy now. We're literally at the cusp of something akin to that, and you described it so beautifully. Yeah, there's so much there. I would say this is for historical and theological buffs. This is our Constantine moment. If you follow Christian history, the first period of the church, the first couple of centuries were pretty dark. It was hard. I mean, the martyrdom, the persecutions, the jailings, they were very, very difficult. Augustine writes about the difficulty of Christians getting jobs, for example, teaching rhetoric and so forth, because in the Greco-Roman world, the powers that be were concerned about the ideas that they would be spreading through there that were counter to the pagan structure of the empire. And so for about 3 centuries, um, Christians were radically persecuted. And what was the result? What happened? They grew astronomically. They, for lack of a better term, weathered the storm. And when you can weather the storm, that means that you have something that is the basis for social and civilizational flourishing. And so when Constantine saw that, was it 311 AD or so? When Constantine saw that, he said, that's what I want my empire to be. I want my empire to flourish and grow the way this movement has been flourishing and growing. That is what Bitcoin has been able to do over the last 8 years. We weathered that storm and we grew. I got in, when did I get in? I know 2019, 2017, 2019 seem to be like the two key years whenever I talk to Bitcoiners. I got in, I think, around 2021. And largely because of the storm. I said, I gotta be faithful to what I'm preaching here with the parallel economy. I gotta detach myself, decouple myself as much as possible from the old liberal, increasingly tyrannical institutions. And especially after I saw what happened to the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa and the way they were getting debanked. I mean, just truckers, let this hit you. Truckers were getting debanked because they were radicalists, they were terrorists, and all this sort of nonsense. Nigel Farage was at the conference in Vegas, And he talked about his experience of being debanked, and that's what woke him up to sort of this DeFi, this larger DeFi world of which Bitcoin is the giant. So I think what we did is we doubled down on the parallel economy concept, that we are the true economy, we are the true politics, our community, we are the true keepers of civilization. And while Rome continues to want to double down on its absurdities and it's falling apart right in front, civilizationally, right in front of our very eyes, we're not going to be part of that. We're not going to be part of that implosion. We're going to build society. We're going to, and how do you build society? What do you need ultimately? Foundationally, probably I should say. You need money. You need some kind of capital to work with. If you don't have capital, you're only going to get, you're hunter-gatherers, basically, when all is said and done. And I know we have tech nomads and so on, but no, if we don't want to be just hunter-gatherers, if we want to really build society, then it's going to have to be rooted in a form of finance that is not dependent on the institutionally controlled banking system and the Fed and so forth, that was being used to punish, let's just be blunt, patriots who just love faith, family, and freedom. And so we decoupled ourselves from that system as much as we could. Everyone's at their different stages with that, levels and comfort and so on. And we didn't just weather the storm, we thrived. We thrived. Bitcoin, I mean, just compare Coinbase to when it first started. What? How old is Coinbase now? 6, 7, 8 years old? I don't forget when it went public and all. But just look at all the tokens that are on there. I mean, I know I don't look at 99% of them, but I mean, crypto has just taken on a life of its own, and it's international, and it's 24/7, and it could care. Dude, I I was told by a colleague of mine, hey, there's an ETF you want to invest in. It's really good. And I'm like, oh, okay, all right, fine. So I go to my Vanguard account, and I see I don't have any money in the what do you call it? In the money market section, wherever you draw your money from to buy an ETF or whatever. So I said, oh, all right, well, I got to wire some money from my bank account. So I did, and I clicked to wire the money. I kid you not, this happened last Tuesday. I clicked to wire the money, and then all of a sudden there's a message that says all wire transfers require, I kid you not, a 7-day delay before you can use it. A 7-day confirmation. I still can't buy that ETF as we speak. I'm still waiting for the wire transfer to clear. Now, that's prehistoric at this point when it comes to finance. I mean, I've been involved so much with crypto, I couldn't even wrap my mind around the message. I'm like, what are you even talking about? And that's what we have created a system that is totally independent of that kind of institutional nonsense, that kind of institutional gatekeeping. And so, I mean, literally, like you just said, I mean, we have a system of finance now that can bypass the old industrial banking system the way email and texting bypass the post office. Think about how you communicate. Think about 99% of your communication has nothing to do with a landline and got nothing to do with the post office. Nothing. That's what finance is going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And so much to unpack there, to specifically truckers convoy. A lot of those guys were friends of mine. They were experiencing it. I remember it vividly. One of the main figureheads, we were actually doing a show at the time. He's a very well-known Bitcoiner in Canada. And, they went to his house, right?
Yeah. It was
And,
horrible.
the double standard between, how they treat certain political ideologies and other political ideology, it's a little bit, it's glaring, right? To say the
It's
least.
glaring, and everybody sees it. Yeah.
Yeah. And another thing I'll say too, Dr. Turley, is, specifically this last century, because you go down this rabbit hole as a Bitcoiner. And you really see when the Federal Reserve was established. It was established during the Progressive Era, right?
Right.
And
Good
then
point.
what came after, right? You have the famous Ron Paul quote, which is, "It's not a coincidence that the century of central banking is the bloodiest century in human history." You
Yes.
have the two world
Yes.
wars, you have
Yes.
the Great Recession, the Great Depression, and also I would say central banking is a great catalyst towards wealth inequality.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
and that's something that I think perhaps conservatives miss. They don't under they I think they forget, the benefits of sound money. I think,
Yeah.
gold does serve that. I think I'm a big fan of physical gold, not paper gold, but physical gold. I think it does serve that. I think Bitcoin's a little bit better because it has absolute scarcity and its physical characteristics
Yes.
allow for you to take self custody, for you to send it.
Yes.
But
Yes.
I think it also gives voices that are under attack by the current system the ability to, as you say, opt out and
Mhm.
operate in a parallel economy where they
Mhm.
don't have to deal with middlemen, they don't have to deal with intermediaries, they don't have to deal with gatekeepers. Because it's not that banks want to make the wire system so bad. It's that essentially banks have become this third armed enforcement on behalf of the state. And,
Right.
they have all these
Right.
KYC laws, all these AML laws. And, when everything's fine and dandy, when there isn't any chaos, it's like, okay, that's not a problem. But when things start to get politicized, those same tools get weaponized towards
Yes.
certain political groups. And I think that's what we saw over the last
Yes.
9 years, including the current president. Like he was even a victim
Yeah.
of the debanking
Yep.
himself.
Yep.
So what I'm seeing, and Dr. Turley, you're in the forefront of this, you're in the vanguard of this, is where do you think the conservative movement is right now in terms of understanding sound money, understanding the
Mm.
benefits of sound money, understanding the benefits of being able to take custody of your wealth,
Yeah.
understanding the scam that is the Federal Reserve that has allowed unchecked spending by the federal government, which continues to allow it to grow and grow and grow and grow. You always hear
Yeah.
this in circles, this talk about the deep state. It's not the deep state, it's the administrative state. It's not a
Mm.
conspiracy theory. It just
Right.
comes down to this. It's an unelected bureaucracy that remains in power regardless
Yep.
of who gets elected into
Yep.
office.
Yep.
What funds that?
Yes.
It's the
Right.
Federal Reserve.
Right.
The
Right.
US government spends $2 trillion every single year, more than it collects in tax revenue.
Right.
How are they paying for that? They
Right.
they print the
Print
difference
it up. Yeah.
at your
Yeah.
expense,
Right.
right? So
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
where does the conservative movement in the US kind of where do they stand? Where they see this? Are they aware? Do they understand that sound money exists? Do they understand that sound money could potentially be a solution to a lot of the problems that they're experiencing today?
I think it's still everything you described, I think is still relatively peripheral on the conservative side of things. It's certainly better than where it was post Ron Paul. He did a great job, sort of being an evangelist, for this, particularly in 2012 and his run for a couple of runs for president, and his writing of and the Fed and so forth. I mean, a lot of people are getting to know the date 1913. I mean, it is starting to I mean, the Bitcoin rhetoric, as it were, and its frames of reference are starting to permeate. I'm noticing that. So I was on a family vacation last week around Lake George area in upstate New York. We do it my extended family, my mom, my uncle, and my aunt, and so on. And they're from California, and he's very conservative, and he just, like, I'll ask him, like, when I see him later on the day, "Oh, what'd you do today?" "Oh, I had to get my Fox fix." He's that kind of guy, or, he's around 80 years old and so forth. Now, generally speaking, you would think that he's the post-World War II baby boomer, demographic. So, all we need to do is just kinda, get close to some balanced budgets and fiscal responsibility, and we're good to go. And even he was starting to question things like the Fed and the wisdom of the Scott Bessent was doing this over the weekend, that we do need to audit the Fed. We do need to look at whether or not it's still serves its purpose or it's no longer fit for purpose of whatever that purpose was. And so I'm seeing it. And that inevitably happens. Again, if this is our Constantine moment, inevitably the empire is going to shift away from pagan frames of reference to more Christianized frames of reference. If we really are moving into this decentralized, sort of cybernetic world of finance, inevitably our financial literacy and vocabulary is going to shift along with it just organically. It's just gonna inevitably happen, especially when more and more portfolios are putting, what are they putting now? 5%, 10% into Bitcoin. If you're in BlackRock or something, and these big, investment firms, yeah, you've got probably a good 3 to 5% of your portfolio, and you may not even know it. So inevitably, it just seems like it becomes a lingua franca, and it just kind of it works its way in conceptually um, uh, as well as verbally into our conception. But I hate to say it, but right now I still think we're on the cutting edge of it. It's not that big right now, and but just the growth just in the last 4 years has been, and this, I'm preaching to the choir here. It's just been so astonishing, and we're just getting started. And now with kind of the evangelists like Saylor and so forth getting on Fox Business and or on Fox News, and even sitting down and talking with Jordan Peterson. They had a very, very good podcast interview, hour and a half or so. It's becoming it's making its way into the nomenclature. Now, of course, you're going to have your holdouts. It's not money. It's not real money, and if I can't lift it, it doesn't, the kind of the Peter Schiff sort of crowd. Although I think Peter is at least very thoughtful in terms of his dismissals, but you're still going to have that. But you still have the Luddites that don't use email, don't use a computer. They're there, but eventually they just sort of phase out. But until, I don't know, I couldn't give a percentage, but the numbers that are coming to the Bitcoin conference are astonishing. What were there? 30,000 when we were in Vegas?
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. That's incredible. I've been to a number of conferences. I've never seen a conference with that kind of attendance. So now I'm not saying they're all obviously Republicans or conservatives, but a good majority of them are certainly inclined that way. And I think they are drawing the party faithful in that direction inevitably. And as soon as they start getting over the mystery and the techno babble that often is so associated with crypto, I just think and when they start getting familiar with using a Coinbase app, realizing, wow, it really is as simple as it could possibly be, far simpler than wiring money from my bank to my investments. Yeah, it's inevitable. It's going to happen, but we're still at the early stages.
Yeah, and I'm very glad that you gave us that perspective, because we are in a bit of an echo chamber as Bitcoiners. And but like I said, when I saw yourself there, and I believe I saw Michael Knowles at the 2023 or 2024 conference. I'm like,
you've written about it. Yeah.
Oh wow! And then you have the Rumble fellas.
I saw that. They had their own booth there. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like slowly kind of permeating. And I had the honor of being able to interview Senator Lummis in DC in January. And one of the things I'm noticing, Dr. Turley, and again, this is a little bit outside of the Overton window, and I try to be as inclusive as possible in my wording and my language, but there's been a couple bills that have passed in the House. And the way that I see the future is we have a future of peace, prosperity, opportunity, and hope, which is a future of disintermediation, Bitcoin. And then we have a future of nihilism, poverty, despair. And
Yeah.
that's the continuation of fiat, which
That's
the
right.
next evolution is central bank digital currencies.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
here's the thing, what I'm seeing, because everyone's calling for bipartisanship, and as me included, but simultaneously, what the message that I give to my audience is vote for pro Bitcoin, anti CBDC candidates. That's what I always say. If you look at one of the latest votes in the House, that was specifically an anti CBDC bill, right? That would prohibit the federal government from launching a central bank digital currency, that was voted on simultaneously with the Genius Act and the Clarity Act. It was literally split across party lines.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was
Wow.
Republicans voted for the bill that would
Well, yeah.
prohibit CBDCs, and Democrats voted against the bill that would allow for central bank digital currencies. So, as a Bitcoiner, I'm saying, look, it's Bitcoin over party. Vote for pro Bitcoin candidates, vote for anti CBDC candidates. But the trend is there.
Yeah.
You can see it. It's very obvious to me, right? I don't think the Overton window has shifted enough for me to make a complete conclusion saying, like, listen, guys, you got to vote a certain direction. But this has been a bill that has been voted on twice,
Yep.
and twice you've gotten the same results post-election,
Yes.
because the previous election wasn't very kind to the previous party in power, right?
Right.
And it
Right.
seems like they haven't changed their stance. The Elizabeth Warren camp has not changed their stance on Bitcoin. They see it as a very present danger to the central banking system itself,
Yes. To their power. Yes.
and you can make the argument that if you see, and I'm sure you've seen this, Dr. Turley, Trump and Jerome Powell have been going at it for the last couple of months,
Big
right?
Well, they're now pressing charges again. Well, recommending that charges get pressed for perjury before the Senate Banking Committee. Yeah, but in other words, they want to get rid of them. They're doing everything they can to get rid. Even all the rhetoric I think over the weekend from Scott Bessent. Yeah, maybe we do have to look at whether or not we need a Fed or not. That's all pressure to get rid of Jerome, man. Yeah,
They
yeah.
have not been acting independent. They have not been They have not been acting
No,
neutral, and they have not been acting in an independent manner. They've been acting as a politically motivated institution. And if they're a politically motivated institution, should they have the protections that the Federal Reserve has?
right,
Right.
exactly.
So these are like really, really important questions. So I want to get your thoughts on that before we talk about your book, because you did recently release a book. It's available on Amazon right now. It's number one in comparative politics right now. It's called America Awakened: The Collapse of Globalism, The Return to Faith, Family, and Freedom. I have some questions regarding that book, and I'm so excited. I got my copy. I think it's in the mail right now.
Yo, I want to tell you about the best place to build your automatic self-custody Bitcoin stack. I'm talking about bitcoinwell.com. What makes bitcoinwell.com different is that it's a completely non-custodial platform, meaning as soon as you buy Bitcoin and the funds clear, it goes straight to your self-custody Bitcoin wallet address. And that perfectly aligns with the Simply Bitcoin ethos of the separation of money and state. Support Bitcoin on-ramps that are self-custody by default. To get started, go to bitcoinwell.com today. It takes 2 to 5 minutes to sign up, and bada bing, bada boom, you're ready to buy Bitcoin.
So, Dr. Turley, do you have some comments in regards to the Federal Reserve, what I was just saying before we pivot the conversation to your new book?
Yeah, no, I think you set it up. I think you set it up brilliantly. I mean, so technology is a two-headed monster. There's no way around that. I think we all know that. It can be an incredible dynamic for freedom, and that's what we're seeing. I write about it in the book. There's a chapter on techno-populism, and certainly Bitcoin is at the heart of that, just as well as the internet as a whole, the network society, which basically democratizes information away from monopolized institutions like the legacy media that once did have a privileged access to information that we did not have. So if we wanted to be privy to that information, we had to avail ourselves of these legacy media institutions. Those days are gone. We have the same access to the same information that anybody at CNN has, and therefore we get to fact check them, right? We get to say, wait a minute, what? Just exactly how you started this conversation. Wait, I'm looking at what the legacy media is telling me, and that's not what's going on. Then I go to these independent content creators, go, yeah, that's it, and that transparency, and even just the personal relationship that develops becomes a means of not just information enrichment, but also relational enrichment as well in our lives. And we need it all, as opposed to this very sterile, um, removed lecturing posture of the legacy media. So technology and the network society has freed us from the legacy media. It's freed us from the post office, and it's freeing us increasingly from the Federal Reserve banking system. And so so freedom becomes a very key term for this conception of technology. But what is technology fundamentally about? It is fundamentally about control. That's what technology does. It controls, right? I turn on a light switch, that tech controls the ambiance around me, whatever it is, or I put the thermostat on, that technology controls the temperature. Technology controls. That's what it does. That's what enables us to realize so much freedom. But when you get technocrats in our political system, then they use the technology to further their control. They see themselves as the expert class that alone has the competency to rightly manage the technology. So then technology can also give birth to almost like a slave mentality, that we are supposed to, quote, trust the experts no matter what they say. And that, boy, if anything, we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years, we saw that on steroids for sure. And so it can go in either direction. So that's why we talked about this in Vegas. Right when you said that, I went, oh man, I remember you brought up that point. Yeah, it's either techno populism or it's CBDCs. It's one way or the other. You're either going to go the way of techno-freedom, or you're going to go the way of tyranny. It's one or the other. I think you're absolutely right. And by God's grace, I do think we are thankfully moving in the techno libertas direction more and more, because people saw what happened over the last 4 to 5 years, and they're increasingly shocked by it. They're increasingly horrified by it, and they don't want to have anything to do with that anymore. And then when they realize that technology is a means that frees them from the confines of the legacy media or the post office or the banking industry and so forth, I think that once the genie's out of the bottle, that's very hard to try to convince them to push back. Again, your message of prosperity for all resonates so beautifully, but again, it's a cutting edge new thing. Whereas, not to be too political here, Mamdani in New York is going the old 19th century Marxist route. He's going the old industrial route, saying, I can bring prosperity to all, just make sure you give all control to me. And then, and that's the devil's bargain with the technocratic conception of technocracy. The devil's bargain is, and C.S. Lewis talks about this in his Abolition of Man, that they become masters at promising that you are most free when they are most in control.
Yeah.
You are most free when they are most in. If you wanted to sum up the Mamdani platform in New York right now, or the new Somali socialist fellow, that's it. I am your ticket to freedom, and that ticket is paid for by you giving me control of virtually everything, even the means of production. Ultimately, that's where it goes. And of course, we know how this story ends every single time. They do not bring people up into prosperity. They crush prosperity and bring poverty to all. But you're all equal. Hurrah, hurrah. So I think you've got that balance, the balance between a techno-libertas versus a technocratic tyranny. And that's going to be the choice. In the
Mhm.
end, that's going to be the choice. And ironically, the techno-tyranny has to draw from the old industrialized 19th, 20th century order, the frames of reference that developed, the socialistic frames of reference, that the collectivist frames of reference that developed from that. Whereas we're on the cutting edge talking about a new era and a new age of extraordinary freedom from the old binding, out of date, stale, tyrannical institutions that are holding you and society back. And I think that's, again, that's when Musk and Trump were together. I think they were imbibing, they were radiating that for people to imbibe literally every single moment. Now they've kind of broken a little bit. It's okay. I think they're going to come back together eventually. It's in both their interests. But I just think that techno populist genie broken out of the bottle is going to be very, very hard to defeat.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I think, it's a one-way door once you start consuming information from X or YouTube or Rumble, and you start thinking critically. And it's a
Yes.
one-way door once you take the orange pill and you reclaim back your sovereignty, owning and saving in Bitcoin. You're not going back, right? So, and you're bringing up some interesting points, which is, and I'm originally from Venezuela, so I saw this happen to
Oh, there you
my
go. Yeah.
parents' country within 20 years, Venezuela
Chavez,
becoming
Maduro. Yeah.
one of the
Yeah.
most prosperous countries in South
Yep.
America, to within 20 years of to be inclusive in the wording and language, collectivism, basically destroyed the country.
Yeah. Easily.
And this has happened in basically every single continent for the last 100 years.
Yeah.
It's time to try something new. And I have a really good buddy of mine, and he wrote a book called the Uncommunist Manifesto. And
Oh, I love it.
one of the things that he wrote in it was, he said the fifth tenet of the Communist Manifesto is the necessity for central banking, right? And then you're just like, you start the necessity for the centralization of credit. But I kind of want to pivot the conversation a little bit, Dr. Turley,
Yeah.
to, there's a part in your book where you talk about the spiritual warfare aspect of all of this that's happening. And you make the claim that we're witnessing one of the greatest religious renewals
Yeah.
in world history. Now, I can attest to that as a Bitcoiner. I've seen Bitcoiners like literally go get baptized. I've
Wow.
seen a renewal in faith of people that start adopting Bitcoin. My theory behind this is, I think fiat is inherently disconnected from reality. I think Bitcoin is connected to reality, anchored to reality via proof of work. So it's anchored to the universe, therefore it's anchored more to truth, right?
Yeah.
And what I've seen within the Bitcoin community is a rise in, religion, in a rise in belief. In my own personal case, I'm Hispanic. You're raised Catholic, but you know, I didn't really go to church that much. My wife and I went to traditional Latin mass 2 weeks ago, right?
Awesome.
Like, you could
I
have never have
love it.
imagined that, right?
I love
Um,
I'm a big trad guy. I love it. Yeah. Yeah.
So, you could never have imagined that. This was unbelievable. Like,
Yeah.
having a conversation with myself 5 years ago, I'd have been like, what are you talking about? What do you mean traditional Latin mass? What do you mean Vatican II? What are you talking about? What are those events? But now, you're just like, oh my God, this is crazy. So I do agree with you 100%. There is a spiritual warfare component to this that is
Yeah.
happening, and it's a global phenomenon. So could you talk a little bit about that? Because there's a chapter in your book that you focus specifically on that, the religious renewal that's happening worldwide, and also the spiritual warfare component of it.
Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah. So it does seem to be. Well, let me set it up here where the notion we've been told for at least 20 years that Christianity is in decline around the world. religion in general is in decline around the world, and that Christianity is particularly in decline here in the United States. What we're finding in this whole new field of study called post-secular studies is those studies, those earlier studies, were complete bunk. They were nonsense. There was some truth to them. So, but it's a little bit complicated to just kind of get our bearings, but I think it helps to explain a lot. So even when you factor in population increase here in the United States, over the last 40 years, faithful church attendance really hasn't dropped at all. What has changed, it's always been around 40%, by the way. What has changed is how non-church attenders describe themselves and identify themselves. So back in the day, say 40 years ago, 50 years ago, they would have described themselves as Christians. Sure, I celebrate Christmas, I celebrate Easter, I'm a Christian, right? But nowadays, or of late, they've been referring to themselves more in secular terms or woke terms, or you probably have heard the term nuns, not the N-U-N, right? N-O-N-E. I don't believe in nothing kind of thing. But the key here, and that number has been growing astronomically. The number of people who identify as secular, the number of people who identify as nuns, that number is growing astronomically. But it's misleading to think that Christianity is dying at the same time, because the key here and why that's so misleading is that secularism is growing in the midst of a non-church demographic that itself is not growing. So if the regular attending church demographic has always been about 40% for the last 40 years, the 60% that don't regularly attend church, yes, they're more likely to say they're secular. They're more likely to say they're non-Christian or none or what have you. But that overall non-church population itself is not growing. It is static. So that's where the misnomer is, that somehow our nation's becoming more and more secular. Now, it is with our globalist elite. Yeah, they hate Christianity, they hate religion, they want to get rid of it all. It's an impediment to their power and their affluence and so forth. Sure, no problem. But with all that in place then, again, it's the Constantine moment. We've weathered the storm. And so what we're seeing now with recent data and global examples and so forth is we're starting to see now that non-church groups starting to shrink. They're starting to come to church now, or they're starting to engage in religious practice again. Gen Z men, for example, for the first time ever. Okay, so he's basically under 30s, right? For the first time ever, we're seeing Gen Z men attend church more than women. So when you study the sociology of Christianity, that's mind-blowing. Even in the time before Constantine, the vast majority of Christians were women. Christianity is always, religion in general always has this more female attendance to it. Let's just say, if we're all married, we know it. Our wives are far more moral than we are, right? That's what a guy is. But not with Gen Z. Gen Z, it's actually the men who are coming back to church. It's stunning. And we're seeing it in places like LA. Let that hit you. Adult baptisms in Catholic churches are up 40% from this time last year in Los Angeles. Again, this isn't the Bible Belt, right? And we're seeing the explosion of Christianity in sub-Saharan Africa. In sub-Saharan Africa, Christianity is growing faster than population growth. And guess where the fastest population growth is happening? Sub-Saharan Africa. So that suggests extraordinary levels of conversions. China, in many ways, is going through two revivals. It's going through a kind of underground Christian revival. Some are arguing it could be the single greatest revival in the history of the church. But at the more power-based level, the Politburo, the CCP level, they're going through a kind of Confucian revival where President Xi has been requiring all CCP members to read the Analects of Confucius, and they've been building Confucian temples and so forth, and they would refer to themselves not as communists today, but as modern Confucianists. It's very fascinating.
That is
You're
really
seeing it with the
interesting.
Pentecostal movements, particularly in Latin America, Europe, Eastern Orthodoxy, Catholicism, evangelicalism. They're all growing. Back in 1991, barely 30% of the Russian population identified themselves as Christians. Today, it's 80%. It's 30 years, so the trajectory is all moving in that direction. So the question is, why? What on earth is going on here? And I think it's the rise of civilizationalism in the end. And that's my view. If you go to the post-secular literature, you're going to get all these different views. There's no consensus as to why religion is making such a comeback today. But I would argue, I think it's connected to the destruction of globalism, the fall of globalism, and more populations returning to nation, culture, custom, and tradition. And the big lie, I would argue, that we bought into is this notion that I can be like a nationalist in my sentiment, but I can still be globalist in my epistemology. So epistemology being the sort of the art and science of knowledge. And what you'll find, and I've talked with nationalists about this, people who refer themselves as identitarians or what have you, but then they'll turn around and say, "Yeah, but I don't buy into the religion stuff. I'm more science." Did you just hear yourself? You just claim you have a vision of knowledge that bypasses culture. Now, what kind of strange culture tells you that? Right? It was the Western Enlightenment European culture. So more and more people, and I'm seeing it happen like firsthand. More and more people going, I never thought about that. Here I am advocating that culture matters, that nation matters, that tradition matters. And yet I'm bypassing the cult of culture. I'm bypassing the fact that cultures actually have unique ways of knowing and relating to the world. Japanese know the world very differently than Texans, and Hungarians know the world very differently than Venezuelans, and Russians know the world very differently than Indians, and on and on and on. And that's why you get so much tribalistic strife, for example, around the world and Africa, or so like the Hutus versus the Tutsis. They see each other as fundamentally different. They know the world differently than each other. So then again, that then begs the question of how do we find a way of common ground? And that's where you get in natural law and natural theology and all that sort of stuff. But the big lie that we were sold for so long was the notion that we could have this form of knowledge based in scientific rationalism that was the one true way of knowing the world that bypass all cultural preconceptions of the world. And that's the foundation precisely for the colonialism and the kind of imperialism that we saw in the 19th and the 20th century, going all the way into World War II. And then, of course, the Cold War, where either we were all going to be Western liberals or we were all going to be Soviet communists. So it's a one-size-fits-all way of knowing translates inevitably into a one-size-fits-all politics and economics. And what's happening today, what's so cool, is the world populations are returning more and more to, yes, there's common ground for how we know, but knowledge it's inescapably culturally shaped. And that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. My wife is from Japan, and so I love going to Japan and immersing myself in that Shinto-soaked world. It is beautiful. The whole concept of Shinto is cosmic harmony, and it's lovely and it's beautiful. Now, we could talk why I think, well, maybe Christianity is actually the fulfillment of that for all peoples in their own cultural expressions. That's the coolest thing about Christianity, even with the Orthodox faith. You've got Russian Orthodoxy, and you've got Romanian Orthodoxy, and Coptic Orthodoxy, and Greek Orthodoxy. So it all has its own shape and so forth. But the notion that culture and knowledge are separate is itself a cultural construct. That is, there's only certain cultures that would ever say that. And unfortunately, they came from the European Enlightenment of the 18th century. So what I think this shift back to nation, culture, custom, and traditions happening by virtue of the shattering of globalism is it's reawakening the cultic nature of culture, the religious nature of culture, and that's shaping the whole of how we perceive the world.
Need liquidity without having to sell your Bitcoin? For more than 6 years now, Ledn has been the trusted choice for Bitcoin-backed lending with transparency, security, and trust at their core. I absolutely love these guys, and I personally have not only an account with them, but also a loan. And some of the key features that I love about Ledn is the fact that there are no monthly payments. You pay at the end of the term. You also have the ability to roll over the loan as well, and you can pay it back whenever you want. Essentially what they do is that they help their clients unlock the liquidity of their BTC, allowing you to hodl while still accessing the wealth of your Bitcoin. They've been battle tested with their focus on transparency, security, and trust, allowing them to build a proven track record of client success and security, helping tens of thousands of clients harness the value of their digital assets with confidence and peace of mind. Learn more about what your BTC can do for you. Check out ledn.io today.
Yeah, absolutely, and you see it in the numbers. You know, you're talking about again the rise of specifically in young men, and you're seeing this in Catholic Church as well.
Yes.
Specifically, it's really interesting. The traditional mass, from 1962. In young people, you're actually seeing a rise in attendance. Like, so like people that are under 30, you're
Yes.
seeing they're going back into the past. And then the new mass, you know, which is pre-1970, you're actually seeing a decline. And you're actually seeing the people that are attending that type of mass, that population is aging. It's like as if the young people want the traditions back, which is fascinating. If you've, you know, gone through the world the last 15, 20 years, you could have never have imagined that.
No.
So the data is just, it's mind blowing. And
It
then,
is.
you know, where's kind of the world heading into all this? And I don't believe it's a coincidence, Dr. Turley, that Bitcoin kind of came onto the scene while, you know, the world is experiencing this type of revival, this
Yes.
type of heading into a more optimistic worldview.
Yes.
I don't think that Bitcoin, it just came onto the scene just when it did. You know, if you are to believe in the divine, you know, I respect everyone's, you know, different worldviews and perspectives, but I don't think it was a coincidence. You know, this previous election, the way that all of a sudden Bitcoin got just thrust into politics. You went from Trump basically not mentioning it to, I'm going to free Ross, I'm going to support Bitcoin.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
him moving his head at like the precise time,
Millimeter. Yeah.
like, you know, it seemed divine. Like it just
Yeah.
seemed like, you know, and again, this all comes to personal beliefs, and I respect everyone's opinion and where you come from. But, you know, of course, me personally, having my personal belief, I'm seeing this and I'm like, this is divine. Like
Yes.
this is
Yeah.
not, this
Yeah.
is not just happenstance. Like this
Yeah.
is all, we're witnessing history in the making. And you know, it's absolutely beautiful to see. And again, like you just coming to the Bitcoin scene, I don't think that's a coincidence. I think,
Yes.
you know, it's one and the same. And you're saying it10 when we were talking, that you believe, you know, it's still early in the movement. But I think 10 years down the road, I think it goes hand in hand. Like if you love freedom, if you love individualism, if you love meritocracy, if you love liberty, Bitcoin is the money for you, right?
Yes.
It is the exact tool that you need in order to live that life that you want to live.
Yes.
It's not fiat money.
No.
Fiat money is
No.
the exact opposite. What are your thoughts on that, Dr. Turley?
Yeah. I mean, again, there's so much. I love So what I'm gonna rip off of there is what I love what you're saying. I think most people don't quite understand the attraction towards Trump and the nature of the attraction towards Trump and the nature of the attraction towards Bitcoin. I don't think it's factual. I don't think it's political. I don't think it's partisan. I don't think it's pragmatic. I do believe it is mythic in the ultimate sort of sense of the term. Mythos, the Greek, literally refers to a meta narrative, a meta story by which we understand everything. So when we go and we see Maverick and we're all like cheering, Tom Cruise is, well, that whole story, the whole story arc is the hero's journey. It's an ancient going all the way back to Homer, and you see it even cross culturally. That's what we call a mythos. It's a myth. These are collections of symbols that help us understand reality. Jordan Peterson would argue we actually can't know apart from myth. I'll go right back to what I was just saying. And somebody turns around and says, no, I think, we once were religious in the way we believe, but now we've been rescued from religion by science. I would smile at them and say, well, that's called a myth. It's called a scientific myth, but it's still a myth. It's a meta narrative that helps us to understand reality, you see. We can't get around. Our brains think mythologically. And what is happening today, I think, is the return of mythos. It's Trump in particular, but I would say the same for Bitcoin. He is seen as a symbol of decisive restorative leadership needed in times of institutional decay. That's key. So Oswald Spengler, the German scholar, 20th century German scholar, wrote about this, where he noted that throughout history, when civilizations had faced crisis and decline, the population inevitably looked to what inevitably become larger than life leaders, a mythic appeal like a Caesar or a Constantine or a George Washington, or in finance, a Bitcoin, to emerge, to reestablish order and inspire collective purpose and human flourishing. So Trump's ability to galvanize public events. Oh, I mean, like when we see him walking into those UFC arenas, man, dude, that is like Caesar coming back, a conquering Caesar coming back, walking into the Colosseum of adoring fans, right? That Caesar archetype resonates when the public loses faith in traditional structures. And they're really looking for, a hero. You mentioned Bobby Kennedy. When he and Trump finally locked arms and decided to align together, the Friday, it was in August, the Friday of the Democrat National Convention back in 2024, and Bobby Kennedy gets announced at the Trump rally, and the people go nuts. What's the song they were playing when he came on out? There goes my hero. That's a hero. That's what people look for when they see their culture, their nation, their world on the verge of collapse. And that's why I think Trump and Robert Kennedy and others command so much loyalty. It's not political. It's not partisan. Nobody cares the party they belong to. It's not pragmatic. Well, I just hope he loses. No, it's mythic in nature. And that, to me, that's why I love Simply Bitcoin. It's why I love your show. It's because you guys, I think, you've got it. You analyze this mythos of Bitcoin that helps people reimagine finance, reimagine money in such a way that opens up opportunities the likes of which they never even fathomed. That's mythic thinking. It's scholars call it remythologization. You're doing it. It's happening. I just think by virtue of the fact of the implosion of the old modernist industrial, second industrial revolution age, and this new cyberspace techno world that's rising, is reawakening. It's giving us permission to dream again. It's giving us permission to reimagine the world in new and exciting ways. And I think that explains the fervor, the rightful fervor of Bitcoin, and I think that explains as well the rightful fervor surrounding MAGA and Trump.
Yeah, and again, I can't keep reiterating this. I don't think it's a coincidence that these two one in a century movements, because the MAGA movement, the coalition that Trump has with specifically the second term, right? Um, you have Bobby Kennedy. That's a Democrat.
Yeah.
You have
Yeah,
Tulsi Gabbard.
Tulsi Gabbard, yep.
That's a Democrat,
Yeah.
right?
She was the co-chair of the Democrat National Committee not too long ago. Yeah.
Trump, he was moderate. Like you would say he was a Democrat, basically.
Exactly.
20 years ago. So you had a coalition of unlikely allies, and that leads me to another part which you talk about in your book, which is essentially the tech trad alliance between Silicon Valley leaders and conservatives. And you had like the most unlikely allies come together to basically step in and say, hey, wait a second. Like, if we keep going in this direction, this might not be good. This outcome might not be good. And it galvanized my industry. We Dr. Turley, we as Bitcoiners, when we have Bitcoin in self-custody, we feel so sovereign that in a way, like, we make jokes and like we kind of like, kid around and this and that. But in a way, if you're earning and saving in Bitcoin and you're taking that Bitcoin to self-custody, I don't want to say you're completely immune to politics, but it does give you a tremendous amount of power, because if the situation in your jurisdiction gets so bad, you can just get up and leave and take your wealth with you, right?
You got it.
So it gives you a tremendous amount of sovereignty and power, but it got to such an extent that they tried attacking the mining industry. They tried attacking self-custody. They tried shutting down pro-Bitcoin bank. Like everything that you can imagine, they did it, right?
Yes.
And Bitcoiner is the most unlikely population of people that do not care. They were just like, guys, like, we need to vote for Trump. Like, we need to vote for RFK. Like, if not, Ross isn't going to be free. Like, we got to step up, and all of a sudden we became a voting demographic. And I think it backfired tremendously, because
huge.
The Democrat voting demographic tends to be the younger generations, who hold Bitcoin and digital assets disproportionately. The younger generations.
There you go.
So they tried to walk it back a little bit, but it was too little too late. It was like, look, guys, I know what you guys are doing right now. And I had Caitlin Long, who's the founder and CEO of Custodia Bank. I was talking to her about a week or two ago. And she told me point blank, she told me, Nico, like, it cost them the election. Like, the fact that they were anti-Bitcoin, it cost them the election, right? And that, to me, it gave me chills when she said that. But I do want to focus on this part of your book where you describe the rise of the tech trad alliance between Silicon Valley leaders like Elon Musk and conservatives. And again, it seems like an unlikely partnership. Like we were just talking about RFK and Tulsi Gabbard. Elon, in the heart of Silicon Valley, like, historically, that they lean a certain way, right? It's always been that way. And then all of a sudden at the Trump inauguration, you had tech leaders from the likes of Elon Musk to Jeff Bezos to Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah, you got
it. What happened there?
The left went woke. In 3 words, I think I got said before, right? The left went woke, and they went insane. They went nuts. They went full cultural Marxists. And all of a sudden, Silicon Valley libertarian types, Elon, Peter Thiel, Vivek, Mark Andreessen, they were like, this is nuts. This is great. They're going to shut us down. They're going to try to control everything that we do. And social conservatives were also freaked out just by the the social implications of these policies of the woke left. And so this alliance between Silicon Valley and social conservatives really does seem grounded, as they ironically just mistakenly, or not yet mistakenly, but inadvertently found out that they actually have a lot of overlap. So if you think of a Venn diagram, there's a they're right in the middle. There's a lot. They both believe in a cosmic purpose of some kind, a cosmic order. This isn't just random. We're not just a big mistake. They both desire to reverse civilizational decline. And they have a common interest, particularly Elon, in promoting family and demographic renewal. So they both see that both groups see the collapse of birth rates and loss of meaning as urgent crises, the nihilism that is rising. That doesn't really work well with techno-libertarianism by any stretch of the imagination. So they both champion initiatives, common initiatives like pro-natalist tax policy, family-centric work environments, an optimistic conception of the cosmos to really just spur demographic and cultural health and societal renewal. And this is this is interesting, but it was something that was predicted back in the 19th century by a very obscure Russian Orthodox theorist by the name of Nikolai Fyodorov, and his notion of cosmism. He had a cosmic theology where he was and this is a guy, he just lived alone. He was like a monk. He was a librarian. He lived in a library across from the Kremlin. And the likes of people like Tolstoy and Dostoevsky would go and visit him and just chat with him, and they'd have their minds blown by this guy. So this is at a time, 19th century, when second industrial revolution's in full swing, and we're seeing all this technology emerge. And a lot of people at the time were talking about, oh, okay, well, we don't need tradition anymore. We don't need religion. We've got science. We've got tech. And this guy, Fyodorov, was basically saying, no, 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 no. Science and tech by itself will only lead to tyranny. It'll only destroy you. The freeing element is when it comes together with tradition, tech and tradition, science and religion. And he believed, being Orthodox Christian, he saw Christ as the one who was able to hold that together. As he's the incarnation of God and man, heaven and earth. He's able to bring tech and trad together in his own unique way. And his resurrection, in effect, sanctified the whole of the natural creative creation, cosmos. And then therefore now, being redeemed in Christ by the power of the Spirit, we are supposed to awaken technologists who can give us the technology to be able to basically inhabit the whole of the cosmos. This is a guy in the 19th century talking this way, okay? And he's talking about one day we'll have rockets and we'll have things like computers and all this sort of stuff that's going to connect us all together. And he was talking about cyberspace before there was even cyberspace. And so he had this tech trad vision in mind, but I mean, he died in obscurity. A prophet is never appreciated in his own time, as it were, his own temporal home. And it just seems that wokeness became the catalyst to bring what were otherwise two disparate trajectories or dynamics together. Suddenly, Silicon Valley and social conservatives became best friends. Now, there's obviously disagreement. A lot of people say there's no real coherence there. But Ross Douthat of the New York Times has been doing a lot of writing on saying, actually, there is a lot of agreement. There's a lot of common ground here. And that means that it's not just simply a marriage of convenience, that there is some foundational social structural connection between the tech side and the trad side. Again, you can see the fighting. You'll see that a little bit here or there, like we saw recently with Elon and Trump. But generally speaking, I mean, look at someone like J.D. Vance. Talk about somebody who embodies this tech trad alliance. He made his money right on Palantir in the tech world. But you talk about a trad Catholic. He's a trad Catholic convert, deliberately goes to Latin Mass. from Appalachia. So you put that all together, that's tech trad in a nutshell. That's archaeofuture in a nutshell. The way forward is going in the past. We want the most amazing new technologies imaginable, grounded in an ancient wisdom that brings together past, present, and future together. The problem with liberalism is it hates the past. The past is racist, it's bigoted, it's phobic. We want to cut ourselves off from the past. Even communism goes that way. Cut yourself off from the past. It's only evil. It's only exploitive. The truth is the future. That's where our hope is. Whereas traditionalism basically says that there are practices and beliefs and identities and so forth of the past that are necessary to preserve in the present in order to flourish in the future. It brings past, present, and future together in this holistic vision of reality, that mythos, that remythologized vision of reality. You put that all together, and then you strap that to a rocket, and Fyodorov would say, literally, the cosmos is the limit. Go for it. And that is the most freeing, meaningful, mythologically enriching conception of life imaginable.
I want to give a shout out to our partner, sat123.com. Sovereignty isn't just about your money. It's about your communications too. When the grid goes down, most people go dark. Cell towers fail in hurricanes, cyber attacks, and blackouts. But satellite phones, they don't rely on local infrastructure. Iridium has 77 satellites in orbit, giving you a direct line anywhere in the US, even offshore. If you hold your own Bitcoin keys, you should hold your own comms too. Sat123.com also has everything you need to start building your Bitcoin citadel. Starlink, battery backups, Faraday bags to protect your hardware wallets, and much, much more. It's a one-stop shop for anyone serious about resilience and off-grid independence. Stay connected, stay independent, stay sovereign. Go to sat123.com/simply today and use promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off anything on the store.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And you were talking about that, gentleman, where basically it was science and technology is going to replace the past, and it reminds me of the cult of reason during the French Revolution. And they tried the same thing. Robespierre tried the same thing, and they went cuckoo, right?
Yeah.
We are on YouTube, so I'm just gonna say it nicely, right? But
they went cuckoo is right,
to say the least, right? And I love the way that you put it, right? Because again, and I think this is why, to kind of tie it back with Bitcoin, and then I want to go back to your book. I think, with Bitcoin, what we're really doing is we're bringing back sound money. This has been, this is traditional. This has been how money has always worked, right?
Exactly.
It has always worked. Every single time in a historical context that a society has drifted away from sound money. This happened to the Roman Empire. You can make a very strong argument that the Roman Empire, one of the main catalysts as for its decline, was inflation, right?
Yes.
Except all they did was just lower the quantity of silver that was in their currency. But essentially, it's the same thing. You're just
shave off the little edges there.
You're debasing the currency. It's exactly the same concept, right?
It's the same thing.
And you can see that societies that have been able to live under a sound money standard, they've been able to thrive.
Yes.
But what always ends up happening is eventually, and they do it with good intention. Here's the thing, but the road to hell is paved in good intention. They do it with good intention, right? But what tends to happen is that people start to cut corners.
Yes.
And that isn't a problem the first time. That starts to become a problem when it compounds over decades.
And trillions of dollars, right.
And then all of a sudden, people wake up, the money is completely disconnected from reality, 100%. People underestimate how much of a role money plays in the human experience.
Right.
It is half of every transaction.
Right.
What if that core concept of civilization, that foundational concept, is not only corrupted in its function, but in its spirit. The moral concept of money is corrupted, and society
Yes.
is running on that.
Yes.
What are the
yes.
implications of that to society? And it's interesting because if you look at, like towards the end of the Roman Empire and what we're kind of like witnessing here in the United States, you see the moral decay of society, and you could actually see the correlation between the debasement during the inflation rate, um, and the moral decay, right? I
Right.
don't know if it's a causation, but there's definitely a correlation, right?
Right.
And that to
Right.
me is
Right.
just absolutely fascinating. So when you're talking about it, and again, this is going to be new to my audience, when you're talking about the return of traditionalism, that's what Bitcoin is. Like you
Yeah.
guys have to understand, we're returning back to a sound money standard. When we were on the gold standard, that was a sound money standard. The fiat
Right.
experiment is new. That started in 1971. This is brand new.
Right.
This has not been around for centuries and centuries and centuries. It's brand new. And I could say specifically for my generation and the Gen Z generation and the Alpha generation, it's been a disaster. It's been
Yes.
catastrophic. And I think that is a big motivation as to why you see the younger generations going back to traditionalism in the religious sense.
Yeah, I love it. I love everything you're saying. And I think we might have talked about it in Vegas. I think you saw the article, the archaeology article on in an ancient primitive indigenous society that had a ledger system for its monetary practices based on a stone ledger. And then the ledger just kept track of where the money was and who had it and so on and so forth. So it by definition sort of set the limits to what the money was, and they kept the money sound and so forth. And so so there is this techno-primitivism, that's another way of talking about archaeofuturism, that and then these archaeologists were arguing that's basically Bitcoin. That's what or just, just crypto in general is. It's basically a digital ledger of limited bits and that everyone can see objectively where it is, who owns it, what owns, and so forth. But only one person can control their own bits, as it were. And we talked about too this notion of the noosphere. That's a really neat concept. I think so fascinating. Where scholars have talked about the planet going through kind of these three stages of development. So you have the geosphere, the forming of the plates and the molten lava and all that sort of stuff. And then you got the biosphere, which we all live in, right? We breathe and so on, and lovely living on top of the plates. But then increasingly, scholars are saying that we're living in the midst of the noosphere. It comes from the Greek word nous, which means mind. And it's this notion that the human mind now is literally covering the world like great clouds. I love looking at there's just over 20,000 satellites that revolve around the Earth. Only about half are actually working today, and of that, I think 70% belong to Elon Musk, right? It was Skylink, but when you look at if you go on website and you look at the maps that they have of the satellites, you could see the cloud in real time. You see this human collective mind covering the earth quite literally, and that's the noosphere, and that's where you're getting the infinite scalability. That's where you're getting cyberspace. That's where you're getting entire libraries of 100,000 books on your phone in this realm of the noosphere. And Bitcoin, when all's said and done, Bitcoin is the finance of the noosphere. It's moving out of the biosphere into this higher order, as it were, of the noosphere. And the wildest thing, if you think it through, is because it involves the collective structuration of the human mind. all over the earth. Theologically, mind precedes matter. So, in the beginning, God created the heavens, the earth, right? And you could go to Babylonian traditions, you go Buddhist traditions, whatever. Mind, a non-physical being precedes physicality. It's the basis for physical things. Where else would physical things come from, right? That's the basic cosmological question. So if that's the case, if mind precedes matter, and the noosphere is all mind, it is the sum total of all human minds, come together, then ironically, the more technological we get, the more we go back to the beginning. There it is in a nutshell. There's archaeofuturism. The more techno we get, the more, as it were, mental we get. The more mental we get, the more we go back to that which actually precedes the creation of the physical cosmos, the mind behind the matter. And so, ironically, going forward involves returning. How's that for a little woo, a little interstellar kind of stuff? But I think that's the case. A lot of scholars have been talking about how the noosphere is inherently mystical. It is inherently religious. There is the rise of people you could check him out on YouTube, a guy named Brian Swim, who is referred to sort of as a religious naturalist. So, if you ever want to learn about evolution, if you ever want to learn about just science, scientific method, he's brilliant. He's your guy. And he interprets it all mystically and religiously. It's fascinating interpret. But that's that archaeo-future, archaeo-modernist. The way forward is always returning. Progressing always means going back by definition if you see the world in that way. So I just don't think, I love how you and I keep going back to this recursive. This isn't a coincidence. This is happening very organically, and you couldn't have written the script better. But I have a feeling someone is writing that script, but it ain't us.
Yeah, 100% agree. And it's such an interesting phenomenon that I think you, Dr. Turley, were able to really, you were able to see this a lot sooner than I was. Simply, we started in 2020, and again, we started it was just a tech channel. It was just a tech channel. We were just talking about Bitcoin as tech, and then we started going what we call the rabbit hole, and it starts opening up your mind towards, truth and the world and geopolitics and
yes.
and all of a sudden, of course, me and you cross paths at the Bitcoin conference. Trump is at the Bitcoin conference, right? Like it's this convergence, right?
Yes.
Of coming together. But it's as you say, Bitcoin is a new technology, but we're going back in a way. Like
Right.
it's a new technology. It's brand new, right? It's much newer than traditional central banking, but we're going back,
which is freeing us to return. Exactly right. And just to really just close the loop there, notice what is MAGA? Make America Great Again, right?
Yeah.
It's going back. It's known as restoration politics. What happened over the weekend was in Japan. It was fascinating. There was a brand new MAGA-inspired political party. Let's see, Sanseto. My wife's from Japan. Sorry, it sticks in my head a little bit. Sanseto. It literally means, the people need to be governing again, and it's a very anti-globalist party. Anti-liberal kind of stuff, very Trump-inspired, very Japan first. They had elections over the weekend. They are now the number 3 most popular party in Japan. They're barely 2 years old. They 15x'd their seats in the Japanese parliaments. It's restoration politics. Russia's going back to orthodoxy. China's going back to Confucianism. India's going back to Hindu nationalism. Turkey's going back to Ottoman Islamism. Saudi Arabia sees itself as the Sunni capital of the world. Viktor Orban of Hungary wants to build Christian civilization. And you're seeing it with
You see in France
with Javier Milei in Argentina, right? And Nayib Bukele in El Salvador. And now we've got Trump and make America great again. The way forward is returning. How do we go forward? Through the new tech that's freeing us from the old industrial tyrannical structures. And that new tech is now reawakening a new traditionalism. Tech-Trad Alliance, it's the future, man.
It's fantastic. So, Dr. Turley, we are approaching the top of the hour, and I do want to end it with this question. If everything you predict comes to pass and we truly enter the golden age, what will America look like? What will the world look like, better said, in 2035? Paint us a picture of the civilization you believe we're currently building.
Oh man, thank you for that. That's beautiful. I do see a nation in 2035. I see a nation with secure borders. I don't think that we're ever going back to the insanity that we had between 2021 January 2025. I see a vibrant religious and community life. I see a renewed culture, a very strong culture of family, thriving local economies, free from woke corporate control, and a renewed sense of purpose, really as a city on a hill for America. That's always been in our mythology. When the Puritans came over, that's what they wanted. They wanted to build a new Jerusalem here for all the world to see and to emulate. I do envision at my most optimistic moments robust mega regions anchored by what Trump is calling freedom cities. Remember when all said and done, he's a city boy, grown up in Queens. Or I grew up in Connecticut, so right near me. Grew up in Queens, made his fortune in Manhattan. He is sick to his heart on what's happened to our nation's cities, particularly the cities on the northeast coast, the older cities. Not so much, you guys are the new Miamis and the Vegases and so that have this sense of futurism to them. That's the difference between, say, like Dubai and Detroit. Okay. Detroit is just like falling apart, whereas Dubai is a symbol of this archeo-future, as it were. Actually has, as I understand, it has the highest mosque prayer room at the top of the Burj Khalifa. But I see mega regions forming. I see freedom cities rising. I see I would call it a flourishing parallel economy, but it would be the true economy. It would be the new sort of like patriot influenced economy. And I see political influence increasingly shifting towards communities of faith and freedom, education, commerce, cultural life. I think they'll all increasingly reflect this more, broadly Christian, traditional American identity, combined with these principles of liberty, virtue, and duty manifested in flourishing technology and financial opportunity, the likes of which we never imagined. I could not even conceive of where Bitcoin will be in terms of its worth. We're talking in terms of total Bitcoin, we're talking trillions upon trillions upon trillions. And therefore everyone who's invested in it now, or invested or use it, or however you want to conceive of your relationship to it, you're gonna look back at these days and say, man, we were at the cusp of something incredibly special, and that is the beginning of a whole new era that will last for generations.
Absolutely. Dr. Turley, it's been an absolute honor to have you on the show. Guys, go check out his new book. It's on Amazon right now. America Awakened: The Collapse of Globalism and the Return to Faith, Family, and Freedom. And of course, you're probably already subscribed, but go check out Dr. Turley's YouTube channel. I mean, if you're a Bitcoin, you probably don't even know about Dr. Turley. So go check out Dr. Turley, Bitcoiners.
You got a friend over here. That's right.
Go to at Dr. Steve Turley TV on YouTube, and you can subscribe to his channel. He makes fantastic content. It got me through some very turbulent times, like I said in the past. Dr. Turley, it's been an honor. Thank you so much for joining me.
Right back at you, Nico. Thank you guys for all the work that you do at Simply Bitcoin. You are changing lives like you never even imagined. So God bless every one of you. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it.